Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are joining us from. This is Dawn Stevens. I'm the director of CIDM and president of Comtech Services, and I want to welcome you to our annual webinar about following the trends, giving you the results of our poll that we do each year to see what are people doing in the world of technical communication and what are they planning on doing and how has it changed from year to year to year. And so we're going to take a look at some of those trends today. So this is, I think, the 6th or 7th year we've done that, Mark. So this is me.
I think it's at least the 7th. It's been a while, but it's been interesting trends all along, I think. Yeah.
All right. So, Mark, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Mark Gross. I'm president of Data Conversion Laboratory. We've been working with Comtech and with CIDM for a long time. Our company does conversions of all kinds of documents and text, and certainly our involvement in the documentation industry is puts us into a lot of these things about how trends are going, how people are using documents, how people are used. So I'm always interested in what's going on in these surveys that we've been doing every year.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting. There's some trends. There are some trends that are just to say things stay the same, right? The more they change, the more they stay the same. But we'll be taking a look at that. But to start with, I know we had a couple of poll questions, Kathy, that you wanted to go ahead and put up there, so we know a little bit about who's attending this webinar, as well as you know, what the future is looking like for you right now. Kind of a new trend that we want to see what's happening today with everybody, given the new work environments. So, Kathy, you want to go ahead and launch those polls to start with?
Sure, Don, I did launch them, but you're not sharing your screen, so I'm not really sure if they're going to be able to see them until you share your screen.
Okay.
There we go.
But you swap your screen.
I'm swapping it. I am.
Perfect. Okay, there you go. Now they should see the poll questions now, hopefully. But, there they go.
Not seeing. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Yep, seeing it now. All right. So the first question, just given our environment today, and you're probably all joining from your house, we did want to just see how are people. How is this impacting what we're about to present? You know, you all participated in this survey, and we're going to give you the data as we had it, but we are curious to see what is the impact here on some of what you're going to see in terms of our data. So are you continuing? Are you reevaluating? Where are we at?
They're still voting, but I think this is going to be positive news. This is great.
Yeah, it does look good. It does look good. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll give you a few more seconds to respond, and then I'll go ahead and close it and show the results.
Okay, so there's the results, and as Kathy said, it looks positive that at least the data that we're going to show you in terms of what people are planning to do, that the majority of people still are saying we think we're going to go ahead and continue exactly as we had planned with our content strategies and any initiatives that we have in place. And as expected, we have some people that are certainly reevaluating, and you know, I'm actually encouraged to see that there's maybe less there than I thought we might have. A very small percent saying that we're going to have to stop. So good. So the data that we're going to show you today is largely still valid. So that's good to know. Now, before we go on and show you that data, we are curious in terms of the audience that we get, in terms of how many of you actually participated in this survey. Is everybody here? Did you participate in it or not? And we will let you know what that is in a second here. Interesting.
Yeah, this is interesting. I'm going to go ahead and share the results.
So we're almost half and half here in terms of whether you actually participated in the survey, or you're here to see how did you rank with everybody else, or if you're just here to see what other people are saying. So good to know. And obviously it doesn't change how we're going to present everything, but it's good to know what everybody was there, whether they participated or not. And if you're interested in participating in the survey in the future, pay attention to those emails. I think the survey typically starts in February and March each year. So take a look at when you start to get those emails about the following the trends, and we invite you to participate. So who did participate this year? Let me get to a point where I can move my slides.
You've got a reminder up there that we're seeing that the webinar is going on.
Okay, well, I can't find my mouse right now, so that's interesting. Oh, here we go. All right, let's close the reminders and dismiss them all. Okay, so who did participate? We had 252 respondents this year. That's almost identical to what we had the previous year. So I guess the trend is that everybody that participated continues to participate. But what you can see is that largely the people who are participating are classify themselves in these general categories that we give you as writers, followed of next by managers and information architects. So largely the people that we would expect who know about content strategy are the people who are responding. We have a few consultants mixed in and some service and support people, but the majority of people who are responding are in the trenches, if you were, and are very intimate with what those trends and or strategies are going to be within their own company. And the type of company that they're coming from is largely this category of technology. So anything from creating software and computers and things like that. And you can see the other smaller categories, a lot of other different groups, but the majority of people are coming from that kind of very broad category of technology. All right, so let's talk, given that background of what everybody is. Oh, actually, was I supposed to announce the winner, Kathy? I was supposed to announce that winner of who participated, correct? Yes, so just so everybody knows, the winner of the $100 drawing is Powell Barron from W Labs, and that's actually located in Poland, is where they're at, and so that is the winner of our $100 drawing. Okay, so now let's get into the details of this survey. So as you can see here, the majority of people who are responding that we're reaching between our two companies when we send out the polls are saying, yep, we're definitely in the business of doing user documentation. So the vast majority of people are using creating user documentation, and that's been largely the trend for the entire time that we have done this survey. Is that, of course, those are the people that we're expecting to answer. So yep, user documentation is a key part of this. But over the years, we've added a lot of different other things that people might be doing. And so the new one this year was AR, which is, of course, way down there at the very end. So only 3.7% of people are doing AR, but that will be something that we'll start to see. Are we doing more in that augmented reality as time goes on? But things more towards the top, the release notes and the help, of course, we would expect going hand in hand with the user docs. We've been tracking the API docs now for a few years. That's staying relatively steady right there in that 40% range. Videos, people keep predicting that we expect them to go up. They've remained, again, relatively right there in that 30%, the UI strings, that same frame. So we're not seeing a lot of difference in the kinds of content that people are creating, but we'll continue to track that and see if any of these smaller things start to look bigger. But so we're interested, like I said, in AR, and see if people are jumping on the bandwagon for some of those more new trends and see what happens there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that nevertheless, I mean, we still see 37% of people say they're working with videos, which is more than what we see later on, but it's certainly in people's consciousness, which I think is interesting.
Yep. Yeah, and I think the big question to remember on this particular slide is that this is, are you doing any of these things? And so 37% of the people said, yes, we are doing some level of video. And what we'll be looking at later on is, well, how much of your content is actually in video? How much video are you doing? And so that's where we start to see the numbers dropping. But we do absolutely see that people are thinking about video and maybe experimenting with it in that 37% range. So how are they creating this content? The authoring tools without being very explicit about each of the different editors themselves, but we still see now that this trend of we're working in XML, some XML editor, whatever that might be. So mostly, again, the same as last year, Microsoft Word, being the second one in terms of what do people use. And again, these numbers add up more to 100. It's not like this is what we use exclusively. It's what are all the things that we are using within our environment. So while we still may use an XML editor, there's still some documents maybe we produce as Word or PowerPoint. And there's where video, is there at 23% of the actual authoring tools of actually having content and having a tool that's helping us with video. The big thing that I want to point out here, I've got some trends over the last 4 years to take a look at. I said there hasn't been much of a change, and we can see that. The editor over the 4 years that are here, the last 4 years, we see that the XML editor has grown a little bit, but not a lot, and we don't see a big change anywhere. But we do see some, the biggest change I want to point out is Markdown. This is something that I, as a consultant, have been hearing quite a bit about when I'm working with my clients. Of we have this situation where we have authors who are developers. They're not comfortable using our XML editor. They want to work with the tools that they are currently working with in Confluence or Jira or those types of things, and they want to just write in those same types of formats, and that ends up being Markdown. And so we can see this actually very steady growth in the Markdown arena of more and more companies are reporting that, yes, this is becoming something that we're working with. We can see that red line there for this year is almost even with where the video is, of people keep expecting that video is going to grow, and that's what we've been hearing year after year, but we hadn't really heard a lot of the expectation that Markdown would be continuing. And we're seeing here Markdown has overtaken structured frame, or is right about even with that, and it's overtaken things like structured frame and Flare and so forth. So this is a trend to continue to watch, and I think it's definitely reflective of who's doing the writing. And in my years, many decades now of experience, I kind of observe, Mark, I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but of kind of a cyclical thing of, well, everybody who writes should be writers, and so we just have writers working, and everybody jumps on board with that. And then the reality of, well, do my authors or do my writers really understand all the technology? Is it faster for my engineers just to write some of it, and maybe have the writers do more of an editing role and things like that? And we see another cycle where then all of a sudden a lot more developers are writing. And so I'm thinking that this is actually showing that kind of uptick again in the trends to have more of the developers writing. Do you have any observation on that, Mark?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, it is cyclical, and I think, I'm not sure it's cyclical industry-wide. I think it's cyclical in specific companies. You go and you start having a developer starting writing because they know the material, but then they are not developing, and they don't like to do it, so it switches back and forth. So I definitely have seen that. I do want to point out one thing over here. The two unstructured, I mean, it's not a huge trend here, but Microsoft Word is a little bit down. That's an unstructured format. FrameMaker unstructured is going down. FrameMaker structured never was, some never became really a big player, but and so I think there's a more of a movement towards structured formats, and so XML editor was taking up a little bit of that, but it's watching molasses. It's a slow trend, but I think it's definitely going in that direction.
Yes, absolutely. So we see like I said, the slight uptick in the editor. We're now at the highest point in people saying that they're using an XML editor, at least in some point, than we've been in all of our entire history. And then, as you said, where's that uptick coming from? Potentially out of those unstructured environments like Word and FrameMaker. And then with the Markdown increase, maybe some of those people are going to Markdown as well, because of the fact that, writers or non-writers, are used to working in Word, but if they can work in Markdown, they even prefer that rather than working in Word. So we might see some of that decrease because of that. So it's something to continue to watch. I think it is. I have lots of projects that are going on with clients that are really looking at this. How do we incorporate the Markdown into whatever our writers are using? And so, there's lots of eyes, at least in my clientele, on the lightweight data standard, which will allow them to just bring Markdown in, as well as working, still maintaining some of their data content and so forth. So it'll be interesting to see what continues, next year. All right, let's move on and just look a little bit more at the authoring tools. Here before those slides were just what do you use in your industry or in your company at all, and this is now which one is your primary tool. So while we have a big number, over 80% of people say they have an XML author on site, only 43% say it is our primary tool at this point. And then we can also see, since we were looking at the Markdown, we can go down that trend, and only not quite 4% say Markdown is their primary authoring tool. So I think that makes sense. We are still the developers are potentially writing in Markdown, but in terms of what the primary tool that the technical documentation department is using is still potentially the XML author or something else besides the Markdown. So Markdown becomes a tool, but maybe not the final tool.
But I was going to say XML author, it still dwarfs anything else. So I think
absolutely.
That's pretty amazing that so many people are using XML author in their environment. I mean, it's 43%.
Right, four times as many
else. So, so that I think that's actually interesting and bodes well that people are able to use it on a regular basis.
Yep, and here's a little bit more details about that XML authoring aspect. We asked some questions about the percentages of content that is in an XML author and things like this. So the left-hand graph is simply, if you have an XML author, how likely is it that it's your primary tool? So this is kind of a combination of a couple of those statistics that we've already looked at before, where we said, well, how many of you have an XML author, and how many of those, and how many of you said it's your primary tool? But if you actually have an XML editor on site, it is highly likely it's your primary tool. You can see that just 87%. If we have one, that's really our primary tool for creating content. But then we also have to combine that with, again, the all survey, taking a look at, well, how much of your content is in XML? And so even though your primary tool, 87% of the people who have XML author as their primary tool, we also see only 14% say all of their content is in XML, in an XML authoring environment. So we definitely still have across the board companies that have a mixture, right? Yes, this might be our primary way of delivering things, but we still deliver content in other forms, because only 14% say everything is in an XML author, or most everything is. And even if you go to, well, 3/4 of it is, and if we look at the 76 to 100% range together, that's only 25% of people. So so we're really still looking at an industry that is, well, we might still be focused on XML, and we've certainly got those tools in place. There's still a lot of work, I guess, on your side, Mark, from the conversion aspect to get everything into XML.
This is very encouraging, actually. I saw this question. But the reality is, I mean, people who are in XML now, even if they're using it fully, there's a history behind it. They started 2 years ago, 5 years ago, but there's certainly a history on it, and many organizations, and we looked at again, technology organizations. Some of them are all very new, but others are working with are still maintaining information from 10 years ago and 15 years ago, and you know, in the military, going back 50 and 60 years ago. So there's always going to be a legacy. It's always an issue of how do you get that information over so that you can maintain it in a common XML environment. So
Right.
so
And even do you want to? You know, how long is that lifespan of that particular information? So, yeah, I think that's what these numbers are really showing us. So, okay, so we have the XML editor in place. Well, how many people are then using an actual content management tool to manage the content that they are creating through the XML editor or anything else like that? And so here we have that answer. Still, this is again a answer as many as you want to type of question, where the numbers add up to more than 100. And so we still see that there's a lot of combinations going on. It's like, yeah, we've got a lot of content in component content management system. 44% are saying yes, we're using that. But you know, not that far behind is that we only have content in a source control system. Those expensive component content management systems might be still a challenge for some people, and they're still looking at these solutions of being in something that's a little more inexpensive, like just a control system, a source control system of some kind. Or even we still see that we've got 25% saying, yeah, we're just keeping it on our file server. We don't even necessarily have a source control system in place. There's still, I think, a lot of possibilities there for figuring out what's the best way to deliver our information. And we have some trends as well to just look at that. Same question, but over the years, what has happened here, and this I think is another interesting one, to look at that SVN and Git and kind of what has happened here. So if we see those component content management systems, yeah, there's been some growth. It leveled off last year. And then we see over the years that the Git has an SVN, some kind of a source control system, has had a significant increase and has been still steadily rising. As you know, again, I think that's another aspect of maybe related to the markdown. You know, that you know, we're going ahead and just storing our content in something like a Git repository, because that's where the development software is. That's where their code is based. And so if our developers are writing in Markdown or something, they're also storing it in that same place in something like Git. So I think that's an interesting trend. We also see the file server answer kind of all over the place, and you know, growth there of just, well, we don't know where else to put it maybe, and we'll put it into file server. So I think, again, something I'm really curious to watch. I know that we at our conferences have a lot of presentations about how to make Git work for people. And so, and a couple of my clients, again, are also interested in that, of how do we, you know, maybe store everything with the software, so that from that perspective, when we're building the software, can we also build the documentation? All right. So now let's move into, we know the tools, we know where we're storing everything, we know what we're creating. Well, how are we creating it? What are the different publishing formats? And so this is, every year we ask the question of, what do you envision you're going to be doing in the next 3 years? 3 years from now, what of these formats, how much of your content, what do you think you're going to be spending? And so we're going to look at a lot of different slides in those different types of questions. What this slide is telling us is the 3 years, so 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and 4 years ago. And as I said, the question is phrased as 3 years ago. So 2017 is the, you know, how do we really compare to the purple line? How does the red line compare to the purple line? But, you know, were we potentially a little slower? So we want to take a look at the green line, and, you know, were we faster? We'll take a look at the blue line and see what's going on here. But what we see largely is that we are an optimistic bunch of people, and we see this kind of year after year of that we know what the buzzwords are. We know what the trends should be. We know what our customers are potentially hoping for, and those are things like the dynamic delivery. Those are things like video and maybe some mobile apps. And so we optimistically say we're going to have in 3 years more of our content in that arena, and then we look at this actual line of people saying here's how we are currently delivering, and we see that in those key areas where we've been expecting growth, we're not meeting those expectations even still. But some encouraging potential is that we are maybe ahead on some things, or at least staying where we expected to be. But on something like print, where we expected to see that number go down, that's why the red line is bigger, but maybe we didn't want it to be bigger than what we were predicting. We were actually trying to say we expect we're going to be doing less printed content, but that number is a lot closer than some of our other actual predictions. So we are starting to see, yeah, print is going out of the picture, maybe because of expense, maybe because we're confident in the other ways that we're delivering things, but still not quite as fast as we were expecting. But some of the big things like video and dynamic delivery, those are a couple of things that I keep my eyes on to see, well, how are we doing? Because these are the things that we hear over and over again that users want. And so we're saying, yeah, we're going to incorporate that, and yet the realities of things that we're going to talk about later, budgets and things like that, are potentially still keeping us from getting that far. And we've done some adjustments. We saw that big adjustment between 2016 and 2017 where people kind of went, yeah, you know what? We're really not going to get as far as we were thinking in video. And so we saw that significant drop, but yet our actuals are still even much farther than what we are hoping that we would do.
Right. Yeah, I think you're right, and people are optimistic, which is a good thing. But and I think the traditional things are pretty much staying, where they've been. Those print, electronic PDF, HTML, and embedded user assistants have been around, and those are the things people are really comfortable with, and we have the processes to do. So, and those are staying where they are. It's those three that are sort of far, future reaching, and people aren't comfortable with really producing. I mean, dynamic delivery, video, mobile apps, those are three areas that are way down, and we all know that it's a good thing to do, but it's not so easy. It's not so easy to do it within the current structure of what we have. I mean, writers are not going to sit down and do videos that easily, and not that comfortable with it. So I think there's a lot of comfort level kind of things that would have to be done for that really to move. That's just my take on it.
I think it also reflects potentially some of the back to the XML and the idea of it being topic-based content, the dynamic delivery versus the electronic PDF. I think that what we keep saying is the last couple of years at least, we were predicting that those would be going down. The electronic PDF would be going down, while at the same time dynamic delivery is going up. And I think that's that idea of people want to be able to go to a portal, access the specific topic that is geared towards exactly what products they have and who they are and that type of stuff from a dynamic perspective. That isn't happening, so the electronic PDF isn't dropping down like we're expecting. And then it's also that book-based mentality of, well, the PDF we understand here's a book, and we may not be printing it anymore, but here's the book, whereas the dynamic delivery is more topic-based, and that's still an adjustment for people to be making.
Right, and the video has to be done by someone else. The writer doesn't have the video station in front of him, and the person who can do the video is usually the person in an engineering group or someplace else. So that coordination may not be that easy either.
Sure. And I think there's still a lot of debate amongst all of us as to, well, what quality video do we need? Right, that I know when I was first starting in my career, the idea of doing video was, well, you have to hire a professional actor and a professional voiceover person and a professional videographer and all those types of things. And yet, the reality is that people will go and watch somebody shooting with their cell phone on YouTube how to do something specific too, and we need to be somewhere maybe in between there. We don't need a movie level professional production, but we also want to be better than the handshaking cell phone as well, and we're still trying to figure out what that needs to be.
Yeah, at least put a tripod on the cell phone, right?
Right. Right. So then here's our predictions, right? So I've kept everything on the slide here that we saw from the last one, but now I've added that light purple line of, well, where do we expect to be in 3 years? And look at what we see here. The trend from like dynamic delivery again. Every year we've predicted more and more of, yep, we're going to get to dynamic delivery, we're going to get to dynamic delivery, and the lavender line's no different. We're continuing to say that's where we're going to be, but that line is double where we are right now. So we've got a lot of work to do in 3 years if that's truly the direction that we think that we're going. Print continues to be on the downturn. The electronic PDF continues to be predicted to be the things that we're going to cut back on as we grow in dynamic delivery. But things like just the website and the help and so forth, we're still saying, those are going to be important, right? And we're going to not see a lot of growth there. But there's been another adjustment there, Mark, in video, right? Of that, okay, we see the prediction now still even going down further. Well, maybe it isn't such a reality for us, although that purple line, again, is still double where we are right now. So, if we're going to get there, all of these things, mobile apps, video, dynamic delivery, there's a lot of doubling involved here of our current efforts to get to where we think our predictions will be in 3 years.
Right, and we're saying 3 years from now. I mean, I was just thinking before this webinar. Right now, this was done before the whole coronavirus thing hit. So I think the prediction was based on what reality was. If we took it today, people may be more pessimistic. But it's a good thing we're talking about 3 years from now, because
Right.
it's 3 years is enough time to get past this and really to go back and be optimistic again. So I'm not sure. I don't think things would have been that different if we took it. I mean, I think this is really what people are feeling. But
right, yeah, and 65% at our first survey said that they were going to continue as planned. So, hopefully that we'll start to see, next year this, more steady rise and kind of an easy trend type of perspectives. Here's our actuals now. So while we might be overly optimistic in our prediction, what we still do see, is dynamic delivery is growing. All right, so this prediction that it's going to get bigger, it's an issue of, can we increase the speed at which we do it to match our predictions? But we are seeing that, yes, it is becoming more and more popular. Generally, print is becoming, less. But our video actually is going down. So I'm not quite sure what that means as we keep predicting more, and yet our trend overall over the last 4 years has been less and less people are reporting that they are producing any kind of video. And something like the mobile apps and so forth, those are just back and forth. So I'm not quite sure what to make of those numbers, but the trend specifically of, I think it's interesting to see is, yeah, dynamic delivery is growing over time, just maybe not at the speed we want, but video is still shrinking. So, what do we do with that? And then, like we've been talking about the stuff we know well and that we do well, the electronic PDF, the HTML websites, the embedded help, largely are staying the same. Year over year, we see a little bit more in the embedded user assistance in 2020 than in the past, but we know those a little bit better, and they stay relatively steady when we're talking about the numbers of people that we're talking about.
But if we look at what's going on now, and the whole country shut down, the whole world shut down, I think print may go down a lot faster than we're predicting, because suddenly people have gotten used to working remotely, and I think that's not a trend that's really going to. We'll go back to our offices, but not everyone. And I think, so I think these electronic formats and ability to work remotely will get out there. So dynamic delivery may start moving faster just because of that. I would think video would also, but I'm as befuddled by these numbers as you are. I look at videos more often than I ever did before. So.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I think that's the user mentality. There is a lot of user expectation that we would prefer to get those little snippets of information. And so it's something we have to think about. This is the percent. Sometimes this can be very confusing eye chart, so what I want to really just emphasize here is this is the percentage of information that is in these different types of formats. So again, we've been saying, how many of you people use these different formats that produce some kind of content. And now this question is actually saying, well, what percentage of your content is in this format? So you can see if we look at the pink graphs everywhere, this is that 91 to 100% of the content we produce is delivered in this type of format. Again, it still could have been multiple ones that we produce all of our information both in HTML and in PDF or something like that. So this isn't, again, necessarily 100% or anything else like that. But we can see 30% of people are still delivering all of their content in PDF. But that still the responsive HTML is still higher, is the highest there. Is that most people have most of their content in some kind of an HTML format, so that that online website being able to get that content in some manner, the majority of people have content, most of their content in that format. But if we look at video, where do we stand? Well, people who have video, we've got that 47% are saying it's a small percentage, but that's what we would expect. Nobody's expecting. In fact, I really would love to talk to the people that are saying, yep, we deliver all of our content in video, and see how they do that. Because I would expect that this is always where we're going to be. Is that somewhere in this 25%, maybe a little bit higher than that, is where our content's going to be delivered in video, because there's a lot of content that's not maybe well suited towards a video presentation, or would be kind of boring as a video presentation. And what people are really looking for, like we just said, is these small snippets of information. So you might have a lot more words, a lot more content that you would have in your PDF or on your website than you would have potentially in your video. Do you have any other comments on this, Mark?
No, I'm just looking at it. I didn't really quite. Does that mean that 90% of the respondents do some level of video? Is that what that means over here?
No.
Only 9% said zero. So.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yes. This is what percent, if you are using it, what percentage of your content is in there. So honestly, that 9% is probably somebody who didn't need to answer that question, I think.
Okay, that's what that means. Okay.
They weren't using it, so they, yeah, exactly.
Okay. So that's sort of like okay, but it's I'm surprised. I guess from what we see before video, that's not a surprising number, but I think other than that, I think that HTML and PDF are just so overwhelming. Is just what we observe. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yep. All right, so we asked, every year we're asking about mobile strategy. Lots of companies are saying we need to be mobile first. In fact, as you'll see later, the number of people that say mobile is still their number one part of their strategy is still the high percentage. And so each year we're asking, well, what are you doing in terms of your mobile strategy? And what we can see here, what are these two graphs telling us? It's largely saying at the bottom graph is that our mobile strategy is basically we just need to make sure our content is also available on the website. It's or available through mobile in a responsive design is what the top is telling you. We're not doing something specific for mobile. We're not creating content that is optimized for mobile. What we're saying is we're taking whatever we have already published to the website and we're making sure that somebody can look at it on their mobile as well. So 80% people say, yeah, our mobile strategy is the exact same content. And only a few are saying, well, we're putting less on there. A very small percentage are saying we actually have more on our mobile devices. And how do we make it mobile capable? Largely, it is that responsive design that, okay, whatever we're putting onto our websites, for a small screen, it's useful on a small screen just as much as it is on a big screen. But there is, unfortunately, still a large percentage of people that say, well, our content really isn't designed for mobile at all. Yeah, you can access it, but you may have troubles actually using it or reading it or something like that. But these trends aren't changing. We're not seeing more people saying, oh, we should have a mobile specific website or anything like that for the last 4 years. It's all been hovering somewhere in that 4 to 5%, 6% this year on the mobile specific
right.
design.
And I think it also makes, I mean, I think the responsive design has been going up, the percentage, the total of the overall, and I think that makes sense. I mean, I think keeping two completely different sets of material is pretty difficult, and to the extent that you can do it with responsive design, I think that's that does make sense. I think a trend that's going to help there is, I mean, trends in artificial intelligence and background kind of things that can make decisions will make responsive design better and better, and that's probably a better solution to trying to keep multiple versions. I mean, I don't know if you remember, I mean, we used to have to keep, if we're doing something with mobile apps, we'd have to keep like 5 different versions depending on what machine they were going to, what phone they were using, but we don't have to do that anymore. I suspect that's probably, I think that's a real trend that's going to happen there. Nice.
Yeah, and yet, we also see the readability statistics and things like that from various organizations that study how do people read when they're on when they're reviewing paper, when they're reviewing content on a screen, when they're reviewing content on a small screen, and comprehension goes down significantly if you've got the exact same content from paper to big screen to little screen. And so I think that still has to be a consideration when most people are viewing mobile. Potentially we're doing things backwards, that we're designing for what we've always designed for, that paper-based thing, and then yes, we're delivering it as PDF instead, but you're still reading it on some kind of a screen. And if we're truly going to be mobile first, I would suggest that what we need to do is design for the small screen first, because moving things from the small screen to a bigger screen isn't going to affect comprehension as much as it does the other way. So yeah, I think it's still a concern.
I think that probably is the way to go. That probably makes a lot of sense. And I think what I'm saying, I mean, if you go to something like DITA, which has a lot of compartmentalized content, you can move around, and you can have the tools in place that can put it together. And that's, I think, where artificial intelligence might come in over here. Maybe you do start with a small design and then have the computer figure out what the larger one should be. And it might be a good way to go.
Yeah, absolutely. So another one that we've dug into over the years has been this idea of social media that, especially when we first started this survey, the thought that social media was going to be an important part of our strategy was certainly heavy in everybody's mind. And yet, and then over the years, actually, we had to change the question, because when we asked the social media question, it wasn't necessarily specific to technical communications. And so yes, our companies use social media. They use it a lot from the maybe marketing trends and those types of things. So we changed the question a couple of years ago and said, you in your technical communications departments, what are you doing with social media? And so over those last couple of years, last year and this year now, when we changed the question, what we're seeing is that the reality is most of us are not using social media for part of our technical communication strategy. Our company may be using it, but for us, we're not using it. If we are, it's pretty much, you can kind of see an even distribution of, well, what are we using it for? Well, maybe to announce that, hey, there's a new content. There's new content on the website. Go and check it out. Or, hey, lots of people were asking this type of a question in the last month on our tech support team. So we're going to tweet out, did you know you can find the answers to these types of questions here in our in this particular manual or in this particular page in our website, or something like that. Some people are using it to get some feedback from users or gather information about the users themselves, but really it's a small percentage. And I start to wonder if is social media that we thought was going to be so important to us a few years ago, if the reality here is that just isn't important. It's not changing really, and from a trend perspective on this, so we're not seeing more people start to get on the bandwagon or anything else like that. It just appears to be something that maybe is a non-player in our industry.
Yeah, and we haven't seen much happen, so that's a
Right.
certain feeling. But I
Right.
think, but I'm not sure it's not going to happen. I mean, I think people are getting used to more use social media in their, when they're shopping, when they're checking things out. And so I wouldn't drop the question yet, because I think the next 2-3 years we'll see different. We just are, especially if people are starting to work more at home and work individually. I think that we'll see different dynamics going on.
So that's possible. The slide that I have up here is, if you are using social media, what are you using? The discussion forums basically being that question of, do we just have a place where people can post questions and so forth as a social media aspect? That's the most popular of those types of things. And then we have this other that we haven't really asked a lot of details. We asked people to write in, and that was anything from Slack and Instagram and that type of stuff, user surveys, although it's not really necessarily specifically a social media platform, but those all kind of fill into the other. Some companies doing blogs and so forth, but again, not really big trends in a preference one over the other of the different things. People who are using videos maybe are using YouTube, to push those out. But if you're using them, you could be using pretty much anything, is really what this is telling us. So yeah, I agree with you, Mark. I think we'll continue to see if there's a change. I think you've made a good point about maybe as people are doing more work at home, the social media aspects become more important as a form of communication with our users, and our users are going to rely on those maybe more. Well, I think only time will tell on that.
Yeah, and companies are maybe starting to get more comfortable over time with dealing directly with their users. So that also is a trend. I'm just wondering, I mean, one of the things I think I saw elsewhere was that there is discussion forums in this survey have gone down from what we saw in previous surveys, right? Which was a big surprise to me. I just don't know why that would be. I would think people are using discussion forum. I would think that's a pretty important way to get information to users. So I'm just a little befuddled by that. But
yeah, well, what we can also do in our next year's survey is maybe explore the way some of those questions are phrased, and so maybe some people aren't really thinking of discussion forums and social media too. So we'll take a look at that as well.
It might be, yeah.
So kind of related to social media, but is this idea of user-generated content. So oftentimes the discussion forums, for example, to be speaking about that, sometimes is considered user-generated content in terms of, well, what are we doing with that content? Is everybody able to see all of this content? Can people comment on content that we've written? Is it just limited to the discussion forum? And so we've been asking this question, again, over the years to say, well, how can people contribute content that other people can see, right, is really what this user-generated content is. So what we still have is a vast majority saying, no, we don't get any content from our customers that we're really using as something that other customers can see. But the rest of the people then, if we look at those smaller numbers, what's growing maybe potentially a little bit is the adding comments to existing content so people can see comments and so forth, but that key piece is that legal aspect and everything else about has the content been curated? So can people make the comment right away and everybody can see it, or does it kind of have a time delay on it, right? Like our TV shows or whatever, that just in case something comes in that isn't really appropriate, we can filter it out. So we see, yes, 16% are saying people can add comments, but then there's that extra almost 7% that are saying they can, but we're going to double check it first, right? So We're very cautious about what our users can say about things. And yet we do see some companies, pioneering this idea that users can, go straight to the Git repository and suggest some comments to change the content. And that's something I keep expecting to see more people go, that's probably better from a resource perspective, that we can let our customers make corrections and things like that if they have something to share. So again, another question I'm looking to see change in sometime.
Yeah, I'm wondering if the liability issue probably is a real fear.
It is.
And I'm wondering if there's a parallel kind of universe of users set up their own kind of information exchanges, and I wonder if that's where that information is going, and there people do answer and go back and forth. It might be a parallel universe there, and that might be something that customers might want to encourage. I mean, that companies are encouraged, sort of have a user forum that's independent of the company, and then they don't have that liability issue. Sort of like all those comments on Amazon when you're looking at reviews. The company has nothing to do with that. Although the company does occasionally add something in, even on Amazon, right? You sometimes see the engineer add something in when a question comes up. So maybe the parallel way to go.
I think that's a very important thing, Mark, is that that the comments, if it is user-generated content, that that we also participate. Is that okay? Are people adding comments? Then we're responding to that. We're reacting to whatever it is that they have asked for, because that's what encourages people to participate. Because I think that's another aspect of this, is like, well, we have it, but nobody really uses it, or we had it and nobody really used it, and so we stopped using it. And I can say from experience on that perspective is that, yeah, if nobody's, just because you build it, everybody's not going to come, right? It is something that they have to see activity and that there's some benefit there, and so sometimes you have to do a lot of kind of self-feeding of it to get it started, and then make sure if somebody does respond that they're getting a response, so that that's an encouragement for them to continue to participate.
Right. You definitely have to get to a critical mass, and people have to feel that the information is going to be responded to quickly. So there is an investment there.
So that's a lot about what we're doing and a little bit of what we're predicting. So now, well, what are we basing all this on? What kinds of strategies are we going to go forward in? To start with, here we ask the question of, well, what are your customers telling you? So why are you predicting the future that you are? Is it based on some things like what are your customers saying? And that's certainly what we're seeing. Again, not a lot of change year over year, but that our customers are saying, we need to be able to search for content a lot better. And then second, videos, right? So that's why, Mark, and I keep harping on the video aspect of where do we currently stand, is that everybody's reporting, or a large number of people are reporting, yeah, our customers are asking for videos. Okay, our customers are asking for this customized or personal content that we could get through some dynamic publishing and so forth. So those top three, I don't think they haven't changed over time, and I think that they are things that everybody's very keenly aware that our users want to be able to find information as quickly as possible, so they want good searches. They're very interested in those video clips. They want to have content that is kind of pre-selected for them, right? But the interesting thing is then, well, what's number 4? PDFs, right? And so we're still hearing from our customers that, those PDFs that we keep predicting are going to go down, well, there's still 30% of our respondents out here saying, yeah, our customers still want that PDF. And I think that's going to continue to be the case until they see there's something better, right? People, if you ask somebody, well, how do you want your content delivered? Well, what do they know? They know they're comfortable with PDF. That's an easy answer to give as a customer until well, there's these other possibilities.
I think, and I'm wondering how much we say once a PDF, you really want an easy way to print it or an easy way to transfer it. And if the content you're getting is on many websites, and you really can't print it, you can't really do it in a convenient way to get it to someone else. So PDF, when they say that PDFs, that might just be a way of saying I need easy to print content. And if there was an easy way to do that, that might replace that. That's sort of in my mind what I mean when I said like a PDF. So
sure. And I think the other thing to think about on this content, and I think we might be looking at how a better way to maybe present this information in the future in terms of questions, is that sometimes the demand isn't there so the customer demand is low because maybe they're actually getting it at this point. So if we look at like a number like topic-based content at only 19%, and yet we know many of our many of the survey people are delivering topic-based, is it that our customers aren't asking for it anymore because they already have it, right? And so that potentially some of these numbers are lower because, well, I don't need it anymore, so I'm not asking for that. It's more important to me. Yeah, you have topic-based content, but I can't find it. So my vote is going into the 51% of content that is more searchable, rather than saying I want topic-based. It's not necessarily that I don't want topic-based, but that it is that I already have it.
And it's a survey dilemma, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and if we look at the trend, that's why with the topic-based, on the right-hand side, that's actually when why I'm interpreting some of these things this way, is that we see this overall trend of topic-based demand from customers going down, and yet we have an overall trend of XML authoring going up. And well, that doesn't necessarily mean all the XML is in topic-based. Largely it does. And so are those trends related, that as we have more and more people using XML, there's less demand for topic-based because they're getting it. And we're also seeing that demand for PDF is going down. And is that going down? The demand is still there, but is it going down because they've now started to learn to use those other things? So we're seeing all these things that we have been talking about up to now, saying, oh, mobile content, very important, customized content, very important. Those trends are going down. PDF is going down, topic-based content is going down. Is it going down because our customers don't want it, or is it going down because customers are getting it? And so we're going to need to really try to separate that information, I think, a little bit more in the future to figure that out. So that's our customer demands, but we all know the reality of our businesses is that there's also business requirements as well of what else is forming our strategy. It's not just about the customers. I think in the ideal world, we would absolutely say it's all about the customers, but what are we hearing from our management team? What do they want us to be doing? Why are we setting our trends the way we are? So what is the business saying? Well, the good news, the 53, the purple line, the middle part, is that the business says, yes, we do want to meet our customer demand. So that's still a vast number of people saying, yes, our businesses are having us make decisions because of what our customers are expecting. Fantastic. The other interesting thing, though, is that it kind of traded places with the keeping up with information development trends still being so high. So we want to stay modern. We want to stay with whatever the current things are that everybody else is doing, and make sure that our content stays stays up with those expectations that we know our users are going to have because they have it elsewhere. So I do think that there's still maybe a user factor in this keep up with the information development trends. But those couple plus the do more with less reality of, well, we support you to do these certain things that, yeah, our customers may like, but we like it too because it maybe costs a little less for us to do it that way. We have more reuse possibilities, or those types of things that would potentially let us do more with less. Those are our three high answers to this question all the time, and so there's really not a trend to report here. Those three maybe switch places every once in a while, but they are the most important things.
And like the surprise to me is always the same thing every year, is that high customer support costs is not a major requirement, where I would think a lot of the improvements that have been made is really to deal with that, and competitors providing better information I would think would be an inducement, but no, they seem to be pretty well contained in terms of what the major business requirements are. It's what we're hearing ourselves rather than what our competitors are doing.
But I think you make an interesting point. I wonder if we're not doing a good job of linking support costs to documentation. In terms of that there is, have we been able to prove that there is a direct correlation of the better the documentation, the less customer calls you get? And so that if we could link it better, potentially that orange bar becomes a more important part for the business. But maybe we've proven that to the business to say that's really the case.
Yeah, and it probably exerted a lot of effort to do that. I mean, I remember reading Bezos' book about Amazon and how he was just totally focused on nobody needing to call any customer service anymore. Everything was built around that, and it took a few years, but now it's pretty much you seem to get pretty good answers from those AI chatbots. So people realize that might really shift things around, because that's all documentation and getting information and all those other things we've talked about will reduce customer support. I don't know if we're keeping track of that, but I'm surprised it's only 17% identified that. That's really.
All right, so where do we fall short? What are the things that we're worried about? We've seen what our customer demands are. We've seen what our business demands are. So if we are honest with ourselves about our content, what are our biggest shortcomings? And what has held the top spot for years has been the search capability, that we need better search capability for people to find the answers. And that's certainly, as I do lots of customer studies for my clients, it's always the #1 answer from customers of what do you want? We need better search. We want it to be Google-like. We want it, to have meet this expectation of our information is effortlessly available. And so it's not a surprise to me to see that remains the #1 problem, followed immediately by something that's really related to that, which is that we have so much content, customers can't find it. So it's still about search, right? We need better search capabilities, but potentially part of the improvement of search is to really get through our content and decide, well, what content is most important, going back to minimalism principles, which of course is near and dear to my heart, and a lot of training that we conduct, that can't find the forest for the trees because we have just so much information that actually nobody ever uses, right? And so that's another, those two things are so closely related, that has to do with findability. And then as we see, the drop off, but the ability that we're not giving the exact content that people are looking for. People do want to be able to customize their own stuff and assemble their own content and things like that, and they can't do that maybe because their content's not structured. So a lot of this is all very much related, but again, over the years it really has stayed up here of that our biggest shortcoming is getting information to the users and without them having to spend a huge amount of time looking for content, that somehow we have to improve that ability for them to find what they're looking for.
Right. And then I would just, it just occurred to me when I was looking at this before that the first 3 items are totally related to reducing the cost of customer service. If you improve search, that's all things that customers would find by themselves. So.
Right. No, that's a good point. Yeah. Why are people calling tech support? Well, some people are always going to call tech support, but they're calling tech support because they can't find the information. So if we could improve this, we potentially would reduce that and maybe have a stronger showing on that. I know some users that when we've done user surveys that kind of report that their strategy for finding information is dial the tech support number. They know they're going to get on hold, and then they start searching for the content themselves. And so it's a question, it's a race of, will tech support answer them before they actually find the content? If they can find the content, that's great. And I was just doing a user survey, in fact, that all of the users that we talked to were like, we want to be self-sufficient. It's just that we can't be. Because we try this, we'd ask the tolerance, how long will you search? And some of those numbers were huge. I'll look, for hours before I call tech support. I got from some of the users. They want to be self-sufficient, but eventually they have to give up.
Yeah, I think most people would want to be able, I really just try to get the information quickly. So if they win the race more and more, they'll stop calling tech support. And I think people do want it. I mean, there is a small minority who will want to talk to a person, and It's understandable. But I think like that was like with banks and getting your own deposits out and all that by yourself. At first, it wasn't catching on because they weren't working that well. You'd go to a teller, but over time, most people don't go to a teller anymore. They go straight to the machine because they work well, reliable, and they're quick. So, I think that's just evidence of where people want to be.
Yep, exactly. So then, what is our strategy if these are our shortcomings? The interesting thing, right, is that, okay, well, our search is our biggest problem. So what's our content strategy? To get better mobile device support and so forth. In fact, I guess maybe we need to add search in here, but our content strategy, again, number one has been the same for a long time, is that we need to improve our mobile device support, that reality that if people are accessing content on the internet, they're very likely to be doing it on their mobile device. And so, that needs to be high on people's mind, followed by that dynamic delivery system. So those growth areas that we reported on early on of we expect to do more mobile apps, we expect to do more dynamic delivery and things like that, absolutely map this expectation. This is our current content strategy, that we are working on improving our mobile device support, on providing dynamic delivery. And then, there are still people who are looking at, and to be able to do that, that means that we need to change our authoring environment, rethink our tools. Still some people reporting things like we need to restructure our content to get there. So I think there's certainly recognition that all of these are kind of tied together, that we need to have a lot of these pieces together in our strategy to get where we want to be. But those bottom ones, the expectation that print is going to drop off and that PDFs are going to drop off, it's not really part of the strategy. I think we've asked those questions and they're not necessarily being answered as it's part of our strategy, but potentially just an expectation that as we do these other things, we'll be able to eliminate the printing and eliminate the PDFs and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Here's our trends then in a couple of those areas for the content strategies trends. We do see some interesting things of the mobile device. Like I said, it's stayed a lot the same, but it is starting to drop off. There's a little bit growth from last year, but the general trend is that the mobile device isn't quite as important. Again, maybe because those are starting to get addressed. Dynamic delivery has remained relatively stagnant. I think the 2017 years always seem to be a little bit farther off than the last 3 years. So I think there might have been some adjustments in people's thinking in that time frame. But we see relatively not a lot of great trends here in terms of a lot of stuff is stagnant. But my trend of involving users going down, that kind of scares me. Of why is that not part of our strategy anymore? Why is it going down a little bit there? That doesn't fit into my model of, well, it's not a strategy anymore because we already do it, because you don't just involve users once, right? It should always be part of your strategy. So kind of curious about that trend there. But otherwise, there's not a lot of conclusions I can really draw from these strategies. See anything you want to talk about there, Mark?
Yeah, no, I noticed that involving users, and I just have I think it's something else. Yeah, I was a little surprising to me because the current trend every place else is to involve the users. So I'm a little befuddled by that one also.
All right. So given all these, here's what our strategy is and everything else, then we ask the, million-dollar question, I guess, of, well, are you ready? Are you ready for your goals that you have set? Are you ready to move forward for those next 3 years and start doing all the things that you think you should be doing? And, well, we're still at almost half of the people saying nope. It dropped. Last year it was 52%. This year it's 49%. So maybe a few more people think that they're getting ready. But this is, again, kind of the trend that or the not trend that we have seen is that these numbers have been staying relatively stagnant, with a lot of people saying, well, we know where we want to go, but we're really not ready to get there. So I think that still speaks to why we exist, Mark, you and I and our companies and so forth, is how can we help people get ready, what kinds of training or advice or whatever we can help with that. But yeah, the majority of our industry is still saying we know where we want to go, but we're not quite sure that we're ready here.
Right, and it's ready in terms of how to get there, or even what to do. What is the, and that's where a trend survey is useful, what people are thinking about, but it's not clear what the next steps should be in many ways. There are several approaches, so, and each one requires an investment, both in education and tools, so it's a hard decision to make. So yes, that's one of the reasons we exist, but there definitely is a need for a lot more education, and I think people are hungry for that.
So okay, you're not ready, or what are the questions to dig in a little bit more on that, like you were saying, Mark, why not? Well, these barriers are gone year after year. We report these year after year. They basically stay the same, and they're really not a surprise, right? What are our barriers? Well, we're not ready because we don't have enough staff. We don't have enough budget. We don't have, our content's not ready, which I think is more of the stuff that I would concentrate on, because I think the reality of, yes, we know that there's not enough staff time and and budget, but what can we be doing at least moving forward? Okay, maybe all of our content's not designed and written appropriately, but if this is where we want to go, what can we be doing today to write better? Things like the resistance to change and those types of things. I think they're all, change management aspects that we need to think about. But those top four have stayed the same. Excuse me, without a lot of percentage difference over the years, is that these are big barriers to how do we make progress. So what does that mean in terms of needs? They parallel, right? Well, we need more time, we need more resources, we need more funding, we need training. Those really go with the barriers. So at least everybody's thinking that way of we recognize what our shortcomings are, and we recognize what we need to do what we need in order to move forward. The question ends up still becoming, how do we go about getting that? And there've been lots and lots of conference presentations and things like that over the years that I've seen at our conferences about how do you convince management that we need money for these types of things? How do you get the right time allocations to still do what you need to do while making these changes and so forth? So there's advice out there, but it's definitely the challenge facing everybody is, I need these things, and how do I get them?
Yeah, and also, I mean, I'm surprised still, even it's still pretty high up. It's at 32% almost, a need for better publishing and content management tools, a feeling that those tools just aren't there yet, which maybe they're not, or maybe it's also an education and a way to pull that together. So,
that can also be a reflection of or it's not that they're not there that yet, but that they're too complex. That's something that I hear a lot, in my consulting as well. I can't expect these types of people, my developers or whatever, to learn how to use these tools. And so potentially part of that better publishing or content management tools line could be something that's simpler.
Right.
Really
I'd like to be able to do it, and that ties into support from corporate technology, and you've got to bring people in, and that makes it more complicated. And of course, there's the whole convincing our staff that change is necessary. That's still sometimes that's bigger than all of these. So
right.
So and we know that that's managing that change is a very complex procedure and has to be done well.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, the last couple of slides are more from your side, Mark, on the conversion strategy. So as you think about how you help people in conversion, here's what we've asked people of us. You're thinking about your content strategy and needing to move your content that you currently have into these new forms and so forth. What is your strategy? And you can see maybe disappointing news from you as a consulting agency that there's the majority of people are really still looking at converting that content in-house, rewriting the content, themselves and getting that training. And it's not till, the outsourcing and the automation and those types of things are still pretty low percentages there.
Right.
So do you want to put a plug in there for?
Well, not a plug, I mean, but I think this ties in both. There's another slide after this also, but this hasn't moved very much. There's at the same time that we say we're going to convert legacy content in-house, we also have the preceding slides where we said what are the barriers. There's just not enough time and not enough expertise, and it's too complicated. So I think those all tie in together, and there's always been our biggest competitor is companies, number one, planning on doing things in-house and then taking a long time to do it, or not getting it done, or just doing small portions of it. So I think that ties in. It sort of seems, it's a lot of times it's okay, well, let's get everything in and then we'll convert it and it won't be a big deal. So it just sort of ends up being something that just doesn't get done. So and there's also in terms of the strategy, very low down to 18% of it here is the idea of automating the legacy data conversion. And the reason for that is tied in some other things I saw, that just people think it doesn't work that well. But that it's a lot of that seems to be based on they tried it 2 or 3 or 4 years ago and it didn't work, and therefore it also gets discounted. But in reality, things have changed tremendously in that whole world of automating legacy conversion. And so it's at the same time you decide, well, I'll just do it all myself. You're discounting all the automation that might make it possible. So I think there's been a lot of technology change over the last few years, and I think you've mentioned several times now, Dawn, there's more education that's needed. Partially our fault that the education doesn't get out there, but yeah, I think the fact that there's such a little focus on automation means that we're really discounting a lot of what can be done. I've just talked to a few customers just in the last few days of oh, I didn't know this can be done, and therefore they've discounted it.
Yep.
Maybe let's go to the next slide, which I think also.
Yes, and I think that I was going to bring this up as you were talking, is that part of the concern here, I think, is that number one percentage is, well, why can't we convert? Maybe the perception of why we can't do it in an automated fashion is this percentage here. Well, my content isn't well structured, and so moving it through an automated process to structured content still is going to take a lot of us rewriting content, us doing some pre-conversion cleanup and those types of things. So I think that's kind of reflecting exactly what you were talking about, and then that then ties into, well, I don't have the staff to fix that, and then potentially there's a drop off there, but potentially have the budget to ask somebody else to do it, or pay for those automated conversions. Right,
and the reality is when you're trying to move to structured systems, most content is not structured or well constructed, because when this stuff was written 5 years ago, 10 years ago, people weren't thinking in that way. So and the developments that I'm talking about is, and we've invested a lot into artificial intelligence technology that takes information that's not well structured and structuring it automatically. So I think some of those things are important to think about. The other thing that's really come along, that I've seen a lot more recently is even conversions from DITA to DITA, because when implementations were done 5 years ago or 10 years ago or 3 years ago, one is it was thought of in one way, and maybe that doesn't fit the needs anymore, or a lot of times conversions were done without the right structuring put into that place, thinking, oh, we'll clean that all up later. And maybe with the new technologies out there, there's a way to do it. So I'm seeing more of that, of here's our data, can we convert it to what we want our data to be today. But yeah, I think a lot of it is perception, and it sort of ties in all day. Insufficient staff, not enough time, and yet we all do it ourselves, sort of tie in together. And lack of budget is sort of one way or the other. I'm not sure it costs more to do it externally, but internally the cost is certainly better hidden. So
right. I think that's an excellent point. Exactly. It's like, well, that's a sunk cost. Our internal people we're already paying them, and so we see that as quote unquote free.
Right.
And the reality of how long
something's going on now. I mean,
right.
there are layoffs in certain industries and stuff like that, so that we may do that, but it's not necessarily a real economy.
Right. Right.
And that negative experience with automated conversions in the past, that's my favorite. Well, you didn't use us, probably.
Well, there's that marketing hat on there for you, Mark. Okay. And so that means I'm just going to go ahead. I'm going to move to the next slide then. So those are the statistics. Mark's already indicated, you should be using him. We're here, obviously, both of our companies to help you, respond to these trends in any way that we can. So you've got our websites there. You probably have every idea of how to contact us if you're really curious as to how can you get from one place to another, and if you've got consultants in your vision, we'd love to be able to help you with that. And with that, I'm going to open it up we have a few minutes left for questions. So I don't know if we've been getting any, but Kathy and Marianne, you've been monitoring that. Are there any questions?
They're mostly comments, but there are a few questions. And I just want to remind everybody, we did record this webinar. So if you want to go back and follow up on anything, you can. And if you do have questions, make sure you're using the questions dialog box to type those in. But one of the questions had to do with the customer demands, and you talked a little bit about this, but are there any customer demands that are trending up? Because most of the trends were going down. and
yeah,
I think from yeah, go ahead.
I'm going to go back to it just so we can take a look at what we had in here. So these ones that we chose were all trending down. If we look back up at here, let me take a look at some of the past year's data.
If I recall, most of the other categories were flopping back and forth, so you really couldn't tell a trend.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And AR, we have asked that a couple times, and it's gone up from 6, or it actually went down, but it stayed steady, 7%, 7%, 7% for 3 years in a row. But it's not going up. But we did have it in there.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's really the big thing, and maybe it's because we have so many options here of what are your customers asking for, and so what we're really we don't see the trends of anything going up per se. It's these numbers flip-flop like Kathy was saying, so it might be in terms of like the order, it might be, oh, this is at 17% here. Last year it was at 16%. It just trade places with whatever it's currently at 16, or that type of thing. But we're not seeing a general big demand. So I don't know whether that means our customers are so diverse that they just have lots of different types of requests depending on who we are, or that type of thing, or again, maybe some of these things they're just getting what they want, or they're ambivalent about it. That there's not really necessarily oh yeah, I really want this, type of thing, and until they see it, they don't think about asking for it, or that type of stuff, which I think is definitely an aspect of some of these things, is people don't know to ask for it because they haven't even thought of it until they see it from somebody.
What about search? I mean, that first item there, needing more searches. Do we have historical questions on that?
No, we've asked. It's been the number one thing all the time, and I don't think it's gone.
It's always been that place over there.
Yeah. So on some comments, as you were speaking, a comment came in that sometimes people just don't know what to ask for. In particular, topic-based comment. So that comment came in as you were saying it. So you and Donna were tuning up your minds there. Yeah. Quite a few comments about, Markdown. You guys alluded to it's mostly developers. Anne Marie wanted to let you know that writers are also using Markdown, that it's just not developers. Okay. So
sure.
I don't know if you have any comment from that.
I've definitely heard, I've heard that again, in my experience with my customers, it's largely been a factor of working with development, but absolutely, I didn't mean to exclude that the writers would be doing it. I just, my gut is that we're seeing the increase because we're seeing more developers using it, but Emery could absolutely be right that we're just seeing the writers. One of the big things about DITA has always been, it's complex and it's hard to learn, and Markdown certainly isn't that. Now, there's big differences between that, and I kind of hesitate at comparing Markdown to DITA because DITA is a structured semantic language and Markdown is really more of a tell me what it's going to be formatted like, and it's really not as designed to be semantically structured, for I think there's a factor in search and all those types of things in terms of what kind of metadata and stuff that we can be associated with that type of content. If we don't have another way to ingest that Markdown into something that can add the meaning and things like that. But yeah, writers are absolutely using Markdown. Again, especially when we're doing publishing and things like Confluence or Jira or things like that already have those built in.
Yeah, and a follow-up comment to that was, so if writers are using Markdown because devs are also using it, does that mean the developers are driving what writing tool selections are?
Well, it does feel like that, and I actually have a current project where I think that was a big factor in this the choice. They're not using Markdown, they're using ASCII doc, but it is that well, we are going to conform to what our developers want because that way we can get our developers to contribute. And so it's that constant question that we always have heard year after year after year after year of how do we engage our developers? How do we get them, to even, maybe mark our content up even with a review? Could we, can we get them to maybe be able to mark directly or those types of things? And so, oftentimes I do hear about customers making choices on how to get their SMEs more engaged. And so while I don't really want to say that they're driving the decision, I think they're definitely a factor in the requirements, right? As we create the requirements, even as I help people do conversions into a structured environment of some kind, some of those requirements do come out, everybody has a requirement if it's easy to use, but much more specifically of it has to be, we have to hide it, we have to be simple, we have to do something if we're going to be using DITA because our engineers will never accept it or something. So those are factors that absolutely are being built into the requirements.
Yeah, so we have a comment and then there's a question that's related to that comment. So I'll do the comment first, and this is about user contributing content. And they said that we have client forums through ServiceNow communities. We don't allow the clients to comment on our user docs, but they do it in the community. And then yes, that came from obviously someone from ServiceNow. And then somebody else, Kathy, is asking, regarding user-generated content, can you comment on your own client experience of who is allowing this? What are the use cases? How are they measuring success, et cetera?
Well, I don't know that I can necessarily name names. I would have to go back and read all of my my agreements with my customers. Yeah. But what is the use case? The use case is largely that oftentimes user-generated content is faster than we can get through our own processes. So it's actually one of the big driving factors that I've heard of, when customers are either posting comments on some kind of a question bank, that's probably the easiest thing to do, and then those answers, people are engaged and they will give answers faster than we can. But even when they're commenting on our own content to say, hey, I noticed that this doesn't exactly work as you have, or you left out a step or whatever, that content is there for for other users to see, and it's there faster, so those users can benefit from that than it is for us to actually get that topic back through a production cycle to add that step or whatever the information is that was wrong, correct it, and get it reposted. In many companies where the processes are so heavyweight that it can take a long time to get an update, and so I see that as one of the biggest business cases, is simply that there are more resources to us and people get their questions answered a whole lot faster.
And it doesn't have to be reviewed, so it
Right.
it just gets out there, and you don't, if it's going through the company, you do have those liability kind of things. You have to get it right. Here, stuff gets tossed out there, and that's why I think what we were talking about before, that somebody from the company, an engineer from the company reviewing that can comment if something is going awry, and information gets out there quickly, and at the same time can get into the next release. So it's probably the best of both worlds in many cases, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, we have two more questions I hope we have time for. I mean, it's 11:30. Should we go a little longer? Because they're interesting questions. What do you think?
Oh, we still have people hanging on, so you can. Okay. They'll get in the recording. So let's go ahead and answer the couple.
All right. So what is related to chatbots? They aren't data aware yet, and it takes a lot of manual building of intents to get a chatbot to work properly. Where do you see the technology going? Is it advancing or is it floundering?
That's a good question, and actually it's funny that it came up, because even as we were chatting about some of these slides, I was like, why don't we have chatbots in here as a trend? So I think you're going to end up seeing a question about that in the future, but I currently still see it floundering. And I don't know that I would blame the technology alone, although I certainly think that's a factor, but it is still just the strategy in general of what do we do with it, so that we know exactly, as this person was saying, it's not set up, the tools aren't set up to be able to just pull content straight out of Ditto, or however we have it, even if we're writing in micro content situations. And so there's definitely that tool aspect, but even just us understanding the level of what we mean when we need to write micro content for a chatbot. I mean, it has been a long haul in my experience with the training that we've done, of getting people to stop thinking about books as they write, but to think about topics. And now we're saying, okay, now we don't really even want to think about topics. We need to think about these smaller pieces of information. I'm using the term micro content that I know Rob at Precision Content has been using a lot, of being able to just have something that is intelligent sounding from the chatbot, that isn't an entire page of information to write. And so we're still trying to figure out strategy-wise what is the right content to write. And yeah, I agree, the tools aren't necessarily set up there yet for us to fully take advantage of everything, but my feeling is this is still not yet a tool issue, that the issues with chatbots still remain a factor of understanding how to write for one.
Yeah, and I think also the tools are getting better, but I think, sort of like the chatbots that are working are the ones that are being used with very large organizations that have got a lot of training data available. Most organizations, I think it's really a training data issue, because a lot of it involves artificial intelligence and machine learning and technologies like that, which are improving and getting much better. But you need training data, and most organizations don't have enough training data coming in. I think the larger, like financial organizations, people like that will, pharmaceutical companies. So I think we'll start seeing them in some areas where it's more, the answers are more limited, and the question, you have a larger collection of questions. But it's
Right.
I think still a few years away. But I think it is advanced.
I was just going to say, if our audience isn't all familiar with what you're talking about from the training data, it's really what we're meaning here is training the chatbot, right? Is being able to say what is the right answer when we get these types of questions. Right. And so really understanding, having enough data collection of what are people asking and what is the right response to that question is what really drives the success of the bot. And so, we actually, I think historically as documentation teams don't have a lot of data of how our users using our content at all, and yet that's a critical aspect of, well, what are users asking and what's the right answer to that is the data that we need in order to be able to respond appropriately or have our chatbot respond appropriately. So that's what Mark is really meaning by the training data.
I mean, the bar has been raised really high by people like Google who get a billion questions a day. Not too many other people do that.
Right. Kathy, what was the last question? I think you said there's one more.
Oh.
Maybe we have lost Kathy.
I was on mute.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there is one more question, and I already know the answer to this one, but it's a good way to lead in for future. Are there any significant differences in trends between writing content for software versus writing for hardware?
Oh, you know the answer, do you, Kathy?
Yeah, I do. We've never looked at that.
Oh.
I think it would be a really interesting thing to look at, and we may be able to do it in the article that we usually write up after the webinar, because I think in the initial question, don't we ask people what type of technology they're doing, and then we clump them all together in one technology? So I'm thinking we may be able to break it down. I don't know if we ask software versus hardware, but I think that's an interesting question.
So if we don't have it, so look for our write-up on the article, and if we have some of that, we'll certainly do that breakdown for you in the article. If we don't have it, we'll certainly make our survey next year, make sure that we ask that so we can do that kind of division. But to answer the question a little bit more, I think that's where some of these factors like augmented reality and even to a certain extent some of the video and the animations and 3D graphics really do come into play, is that things like showing how to remove and replace parts, that's really one of those key things where augmented reality really fits in, and there isn't as much application for that type of stuff, or people aren't seeing as much application for that in a software product. And while video kind of spans everything from, I can just do a Camtasia video or something where I'm showing how my mouse moves on the screen and that type of thing. A lot of what the video demand, in my experience, is coming from is still those types of, I really want to see a video of how to repair something, that type of thing is what people really think of when they think of video, even though video might be just a walkthrough of a procedure in a software. So I think some of these more I don't want to say advanced necessarily, but the interactive aspects of the animations and graphics and videos and augmented reality, definitely there's more trend there in the hardware side of things than in the software in particular with videos and things like that. What I hear a lot about is that, well, our screens are constantly changing, and so basically the video is a throwaway, and there's not an easy way to edit it or anything else like that, whereas a lot of the part replacements and things like that don't change a lot over time. I don't know if that's I might get a whole bunch of hardware writers spamming me now and telling me I'm incorrect, but that's my overall perception there of it's a little easier to maintain those types of things from the hardware side of things, and it certainly matches the data I have in terms of my hardware versus software customers that are more interested in some of those more interactive pieces when they're hardware based than with software, due largely, I think, from the maintenance side of things. But good question, and certainly something that we'll see if we can break that data down more for you.
Yeah, it is an interesting question. And we think, like I say, we think of video and other technology than hardware, but there's no less need in the software area. So it's an interesting question worth looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a couple other questions, and I think we can reach out to those folks individually, but just a couple of thank yous, great presentation, all of the what I would call the normal comments that come in. So great job, you guys.
All right, good. All right, well, thanks everybody for hanging in there. I know we've lost probably more than half of everybody since we're over time, but appreciate those of you who have stayed all the way on, and look forward to hearing your comments next time in our next survey, and or even before then, let us know what you're doing. We're always interested in hearing.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Don, and we'll talk to everybody later. Bye-bye.